They told you that if you treated her like a queen, she would give you her love. They told you that if you were patient, attentive, and thoughtful, she would finally see your value. They lied to you, because every time you tried to become that perfect man, you became invisible. The truth is brutal. She only chooses you when she feels vulnerable before you, not from physical fear, but from psychological admiration. She only becomes obsessed with the one she cannot control. And this is where your awakening begins. When you become her comfort zone, you die in her desire. Because feminine desire is never born from security, it's born from imbalance, from that invisible tension that keeps her wondering if she truly has you. Her emotional addiction is built on microdoses of uncertainty, not on an excess of validation. And I'm going to prove it to you. She doesn't fall in love when you protect her from everything. She falls in love when she feels that her emotional power doesn't break you. What makes her fall in love is not that you put her first, but that you always put yourself first, even above her. That's not selfishness. It's the language of value, because the man who chooses himself will always be more desirable than the one who chooses her over his own dignity. Does it sound harsh? I'm not selling you a fairy tale. I'm offering you the antidote to romantic self-destruction. Every time you said yes to avoid an argument, every time you ignored her disrespect, every time you gave in out of fear of losing her, you dug your own emotional grave. She won't do it consciously, but if she feels she can break you, she will test it. And if she realizes there's no resistance, she gets bored. Because what she really seeks, though she'll never admit it, is emotional structure, a wall she can push against and it doesn't fall. But here's the mistake that 90% of men make. They believe attraction is earned by pleasing her. Fatal mistake. Attraction is maintained when you represent an emotional challenge, when your validation isn't free, when your attention is a reward, not a subsidy. Sexual polarity needs friction. If you are all softness, she cannot find the contrast she needs to desire you. And that contrast isn't about shouting or dominating, it's about firmness, about knowing exactly when to say no. It's about holding your boundaries even when she cries, about not selling your self-respect in exchange for her kisses. Do you know when she finally starts to see you as a real man? When her drama no longer moves you, when she can cry, scream, throw tantrums, and you still don't shift your stance. Not because you're heartless, but because you have principles, because you never negotiate your emotional value. And do you know what happens then? She begins to see you differently. She desires you more, she respects you more, because deep inside, she realizes you cannot be manipulated. She senses that her games don't work on you, that you're not a man who can be tamed, and that very thought turns her on. No matter how much she's physically drawn to you, if she doesn't feel she could lose you, she will never invest emotionally. It's that simple. And you, all this time, have been giving your soul to someone who never truly bet on you. That ends today, because in the next few minutes, you're going to learn the art of making yourself desired. But before that, you must deprogram yourself. Everything they told you about how to treat a woman, we're going to rewrite it, because it's not about mistreating her, it's about ending the mistreatment of yourself. The lie that told you being good is enough. It's not. True attraction begins the moment you stop fearing rejection, when you no longer crave her approval just to feel worthy, when you can look into her eyes and say, "This is who I am. You can take it or leave it, but I will not betray myself to keep you." And it's in that moment of total detachment that everything changes. She begins to see you differently, because now she doesn't just like you, she respects you. And respect, my friend, is the only foundation that makes desire last. We're going to rebuild you from within, because if she's going to love you, let it be for who you are, not for who you pretend to be. And that man begins to be born today. There's something self-help books never told you, something no influencer dares to say out loud for fear of being cancelled. The female brain is not designed to respect a man who's afraid to make her uncomfortable. That's why, when you act with excessive care, hoping to be the good guy, the only thing you trigger is her defense system, not her desire. This isn't machismo, it's biology. Raw and ancient. For thousands of years, women depended on their instinct to choose the strongest man, not the most submissive one. The man who showed authority, stability, emotional control, because only that kind of man could protect, lead, and ensure survival. And even though we no longer live in caves, the emotional software hasn't evolved much. Her subconscious still searches for the same thing: power. Not violent power, not control, but emotional power. Unshakable self-confidence. The ability to set boundaries without fear, to walk your path without asking for permission, to be the kind of man who respects himself so deeply that both the world and she have no choice but to respect you too. When you avoid conflict out of fear of losing her, She doesn't see it as kindness, she sees it as weakness. Your very DNA is signaling to her, I'm not fit to protect, I'm only fit to obey. And the moment she senses that, her desire begins to die. Maybe not instantly, maybe she'll still stay for a while, but something inside her disconnects, and you won't even notice it happening. You become invisible, irrelevant, because what once felt like attraction slowly turns into quiet disappointment. Now listen carefully, most of her tests aren't conscious. She doesn't sit there thinking, let me test if he's a leader or a follower. They're automatic, instinctive behavioral triggers. Arriving late on purpose, ignoring your messages, contradicting you for no reason, questioning your confidence just to see if you hesitate. All of these are tests of respect. And without realizing it, you fail them because you think love is earned by pleasing. You never learn that respect is earned by challenging. Every time you give in without resistance, she doesn't feel grateful, she feels let down, because her instinct recognizes it instantly. You're not the kind of man who can lead, and if she can't trust you to lead, she can't admire you. And if she can't admire you, she can never truly desire you. This is where Machiavelli comes in. He understood something most men never grasp, that the perception of power is often more important than power itself. It doesn't matter if you know your worth. If you fail to project it through decisive action, the world won't recognize it, and neither will she. That's why every time you give in just to avoid conflict, you're showing her that your emotions are negotiable. And when your emotions can be negotiated, so can your value. There's a brutal truth you must tattoo in your mind. Every time you justify your position, you lose a piece of your power. Because a king doesn't explain his decisions. A leader doesn't ask for permission to lead. You are not here to be approved. You are here to set direction. And that truth is reflected in everything. In the way you speak, in the way you walk, in how you respond to her sarcasm, and how you handle her silence. You don't react, you decide. That is the line separating an emotional leader from an emotional follower. And do you know what happens when, for the first time in her life, she meets a man who doesn't tremble in front of her emotions? She gets confused, she feels unsteady. She feels something she doesn't understand, deep magnetic attraction, because you just shattered her pattern. She's used to men who bend, to sad looks, to complaints, to emotional blackmail. But you don't, you stay calm, you stay firm. And that forces her to see you differently, to wonder who you truly are, to respect you, even if she never admits it aloud. Here's the darkest secret no one ever tells you. Respect always comes before love. Always. Never the other way around. When she respects you first, love can bloom. But if she loves you without respecting you, that love will die the moment the first test appears. Because without respect, there is no real emotional investment. So your mission isn't to make her like you more, it's to make her respect you more. How? Through consistency, through firmness, through strategic detachment, through refusing to reward bad behavior with good attitude, through not explaining your boundaries, but living them. And listen carefully, this isn't about being cold or cruel. It's about showing that you are a man with a center, a man with vision, a man with inner power. Because that kind of man is rare, and when he appears, he cannot be ignored. So every time you feel the urge to give in out of fear of losing her, stop, breathe, and remember this. If you surrender your power for love, you'll lose both. But if you hold your power, even if she walks away, you can only win. Because lost respect can never be regained with flowers. It's only rebuilt through transformation, and that transformation begins today. In the next section, I'm going to show you how to apply this in real life. How to go from the nice guy who allows everything to the unshakable man she would never dare to test. There's an invisible line between the pain that destroys a woman and the pain that makes her addicted to you. A line so thin that most men cross it without even realizing it and lose. Today, you're going to learn how to walk that line with mastery. Because if you don't know how to manage pain, you'll either break yourself or break her. And in both cases, you lose. Let's make one thing clear from the start. This is not a call to be cruel. It's not about manipulating, hurting, or humiliating. It's about understanding that pain in a relationship is not just inevitable, it's necessary. The problem isn't pain itself. The problem is that you've never learned how to use it. And if you don't know how to use it, she won't know how to respect you either. There are two kinds of pain. Destructive pain is born from fear, bitterness, and resentment. It's the kind insecure men create, the one that punishes with silence, shouting, or emotional indifference. That kind of pain doesn't build anything, it only destroys. But then there's constructive pain, the kind that appears when you stand firm in your boundaries, when you refuse to be manipulated, when she tries to pull you into her drama, and you simply don't play the game. That's the pain that transforms her. Because in that moment, you're teaching her that the old rules don't work with you, that you don't react like everyone else, that you're not afraid to lose her if keeping her means betraying yourself. And even if she doesn't understand it logically, a part of her starts to admire you, because for the first time, she's met a real man. Let me give you a brutal example. She's upset because you didn't reply to her message within 5 minutes. She texts you, "Are you ignoring me?" The average man rushes to justify himself. "Sorry, I was busy. I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you," and so on. He thinks his explanation will calm her, but it does the opposite. Because what it really shows her is that his attention is completely controlled by his fear of disapproval. Now imagine another scenario. She sends the same message, and you simply reply, "No." No drama, no explanations, just silence. What happens next? Pain. But not just any kind. It's the type of pain that forces her to question her power over you, to rethink her position, to respect you more. This kind of pain isn't accidental, it's surgical, it's emotional precision. And this is exactly where most men fail. They think that to lead, they must be cold, harsh, or distant. You just have to be firm, unshakable, consistent. Your power doesn't come from how loud you shout, it comes from how still you remain when everything in her tries to shake your foundation. Constructive pain appears when you say no and never explain it. When you cancel a date because she disrespected your time. When you ignore her tantrum instead of rewarding it. When you don't change your stance just because she cries. That kind of pain doesn't push her away. It teaches her. It repositions her emotionally. It reminds her that the power isn't in her drama, it's in your center, and she needs that. Because her nature is emotional, fluid, and ever-changing. You are not there to follow her chaos. You are there to provide structure. Emotional structure, boundaries, coherence. When you lack structure, she assumes emotional leadership, and that exhausts her. Not because she's weak, but because she doesn't want that role. She wants to surrender, but only to a man who has proven himself unbreakable. Now you understand why, when you're too understanding, she often feels confused. Because her instinct whispers, no one can be this soft and still be real. So what does she do? She tests you, again and again, until she convinces herself that you're not real. And when she does, she doesn't end it with words, she ends it with distance. Machiavelli said, "He who does not punish an error makes it his own." Every time you allow disrespect without consequence, you are silently teaching yourself that it's acceptable. And if you accept it, she will too. Because your standards are never defined by what you say, they're defined by what you tolerate. That's why constructive pain is your most powerful weapon. Because it teaches, or without violence, that your boundaries are non-negotiable. It shows her that you're not emotionally available for games, that you can love her deeply, but you love yourself more. And that self-love is what hypnotizes her. Because everyone else gives in, everyone else begs, everyone else buys peace at the cost of their dignity, but not you. You walk in the opposite direction, and that unsettles her, shakes her, confronts her, and draws her in even deeper. Now be careful, this power is not a game. If you abuse it, you lose everything. If you use pain to control, to take revenge, or to prove superiority, you stop being a leader and become an emotional tyrant. And that too creates rejection. The balance lies in your purpose. If your purpose is to protect your center, your peace, and your value, then the pain you cause is constructive. But if your purpose is to punish her, to humiliate her, to make her feel small, then you're lost. You must act like a surgeon, not a butcher. You must learn emotional precision. not emotional violence. And the only way to build that precision is through practice, self-control, and detachment. Because if you can't face her tears without breaking, if you can't watch her anger without rushing to fix it, then you're not ready to lead. And being an emotional leader, that's what excites a woman the most in the long run. Because yes, she can find men who are more handsome, richer, or more popular, but a man who knows how to manage his inner power? That's rare. And what's rare becomes valuable, becomes irresistible. That kind of transformation can't be bought. It must be cultivated. And that cultivation begins now. The most feared word among men, and the most desired by women, 3 letters, 1 syllable, a sound that, when spoken by a man of true power, can change the entire course of a relationship. But when misused, it can destroy it. Today, you'll learn how to turn no into your crown. Listen carefully. Every time you say yes out of fear, you give up your emotional throne. You declare that your need to please is stronger than your need to protect your standard. And when you do that, something inside her quietly dies. Because what a woman truly desires deep down is not a man who always says yes. It's a man who dares to say no without explanations. No is not rejection, it's direction. It's a silent message that says, I have options, I have standards, and I will not compromise my value just to keep your attention. That message, even if it stings at first, awakens something powerful in her, respect, because she's not used to it. Other men negotiate, you declare. The power of a well-spoken no doesn't come from the word itself, it comes from the energy behind it. If you say it with insecurity, it sounds like fear. If you say it with hesitation, it sounds like an excuse. But if you say it from your center, it becomes a statement of royalty. And this is where most men go wrong. They think being attractive means being accessible, flexible, agreeable. But in that attempt to please, they turn into emotional furniture, comfortable, useful, and invisible. The no is what separates you from the furniture. It's what turns you into a challenge, into a rarity, into a man. Think about this. When she asks you to change your plans, to bend to her moods, to give up something important to you, and you do it without question, what are you really teaching her? That she can move your decisions with a gesture, a tear, or a threat. That you have no direction of your own, that your center lives outside yourself. But when you say no and stand firm, when you see her upset, confused, or disappointed, and you still don't change your decision, when you show her that you cannot be manipulated, what do you think happens? Exactly, pain. But that pain is not your enemy, it's your ally. Because it teaches her, deep within her subconscious, that you are a different kind of man. And what's different always obsesses her. This kind of no isn't shouted, it isn't forced, it's declared calmly, without drama, without anxiety, without the need to convince her. Because the moment you try to convince her, you've already lost. Kings don't negotiate with subjects, not because she is less, but because your value is not up for debate. And this is where the difference lies, between the needy no and the detached no. The needy man says no while trembling inside, afraid of the consequences. His voice shakes, his body begs for approval. That no is fragile, but the detached man, he says no with an inner calm, with the serenity of someone who knows he doesn't need to win every battle to win the war. That is the kind of no that forges legends. Now, when should you use it? Every time your principles are at stake. Every time she tries to cross a line you consider sacred. Every time your time, your energy, or your dignity are placed on the negotiation table. In those moments, your no isn't just a word. It's a declaration of who you are. And yes, sometimes you'll lose moments. You might lose dates, even relationships. But listen carefully. Every no you say from truth brings you closer to a life where you no longer need to act to be loved, where you no longer need to betray yourself to be accepted, where you're respected not for what you give, but for who you are. And do you know what happens when a woman meets a man like that? She disarms, because her entire testing system stops working, because she can't break him. And then she surrenders, not to you, but to what you represent: security, direction, emotional power. Men like that are rare, and that's why when they appear, they leave a mark. They're unforgettable because they're not performing a role. They're living a truth that speaks through their no. Now imagine this. You're in an uncomfortable conversation. She wants you to bend, to trade your principles for a fleeting emotion. She looks at you intensely, crosses her arms and says, "If you really loved me, you'd do it." That's the moment most men collapse. They give in, not because they believe it's right, but because they're afraid. But you're no longer that man. You recognize the emotional trap. You don't tie love to obedience. You don't put your worth on the line for temporary approval. So you breathe. You look at her calmly and you say, "No." Not because you're cold, but because you love yourself enough not to betray yourself. And if after that no, she cries, gets angry, or threatens to leave, you don't chase her. You don't justify yourself. You don't apologize for your truth. Because truth isn't negotiated. It's lived. And when the storm settles, when she realizes you didn't leave, you didn't lose your temper, you didn't fold, she will start to look at you differently. And those eyes, my friend, will finally see a man who can no longer be controlled. In the next section, we're going to explore how that same no shows itself in your economy, how your financial decisions reveal whether your no is real or just an act to impress. Because if your wallet isn't aligned with your words, then your power is nothing but an illusion, and trust me, she will see it. Most men believe that money is their most powerful card to win a woman, that if they pay, invite, or give gifts, they'll be seen as more valuable. But what they don't understand is this. When money isn't used from a place of power, it becomes begging, and begging kills desire. Money doesn't buy respect. Misused money only buys convenience, attention, and emotional manipulation. Because the moment she realizes she just has to complain for you to open your wallet, you've already lost. You're no longer a man who provides. You've become an exploitable resource, an emotional ATM with legs. But this isn't about not spending, it's about how and why you spend. There are 3 types of spending: transactional, courtesan, and strategic. Transactional spending is the most dangerous. It's when you try to buy love, pay her bills, her trips, her whims, just to make her stay. That kind of spending always ends in resentment because it empties you from the inside. You're trading money for affection, and affection that's bought is never real. Then there's courtesan spending, the one filled with pretty gestures, flowers, dinners, gifts. This can be healthy, but only when there's reciprocity. Only when she's emotionally invested, when she's loyal, interested, and committed. In that case, it's not buying affection, it's nurturing connection. But if you give without that foundation, you're not being generous. You're bribing for attention. And finally, there's strategic spending, the kind that comes from your center. It expects nothing in return. It simply says, "I do this because I want to, because I have abundance, because I deserve it." This kind of spending doesn't need recognition. It's quiet, grounded, and powerful. And that's the kind that earns respect. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote that economic power must always be managed with intelligence. A generous prince without discernment soon becomes a servant to the desires of his people. The same law applies to you. If your generosity isn't guided by standards, it turns into weakness. And she will notice it, not in what you buy, but in how you react when you don't get what you expected. If you get upset because you invested and weren't reciprocated, it's because you never gave from power. You gave from need, and that need stinks. Money in relationships isn't a tool of seduction, it's a tool of positioning. You're showing her how much you value your time, your energy, your attention. If you give all of that away freely, she values it at 0. But if you invest it strategically, she values it in gold. Now listen carefully. If she's going through a tough time, financial problems, emotional stress, and you rush to rescue her without her showing real emotional investment, you're not being a savior. You're buying emotional debt, and it will never be repaid. The worst part, you'll think you're being a hero, but in her eyes, you're just another desperate provider. Respect doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from what you're willing not to give. From your ability to say, "No, that's not my responsibility. No, I'm not going to cover that. No, that's not mine to fix." That financial no is more powerful than any engagement ring, because it tells her you are not available to be exploited. And when she feels that, she might get upset at first, but over time, something changes. She begins to see you differently, because now she knows she can't manipulate you with tears or sadness, that your resources have filters, that you decide who, when, and why you give, and that elevates you. The money you spend isn't just an economic act, it's a psychological declaration. Every dollar you spend sends a message, and if that message says, "I need you to feel valuable," she senses it, and she pulls away. But if that message says, "I am the value," your presence is the privilege, then she starts fighting to earn your investment. Want to know the ultimate test? Reject a financial request with elegance. She asks you for money for an Uber, a plan, some small favor, and you simply say, "I can't." Or better yet, just say no. No explanations, no drama, then watch. Does she treat you differently? Does she distance herself? Get angry? Congratulations. You've just discovered her true interest. And if she reacts with maturity, accepts it, and continues to value you the same, then maybe she's worth investing in. Because your money should only flow towards someone who respects the source of that value, you. Here's a brutal truth. Many women will test you with money before they test you with emotions, because they know it's easier to manipulate a wallet than a mind. And if you fall for that, you lose everything you've built. That's why your economy cannot be ruled by the desire to please. It must be ruled by your vision. When you invest in yourself, your body, your mind, your growth, you send a silent message to the universe. I am the priority. And when she sees your money flowing toward your evolution instead of her whims, something shifts in her perception. You're no longer a provider, you're a leader. You're no longer trying to buy her affection, you're showing that you already deserve it. Look, the average man spends to please. The high-value man invests to elevate. And if a purchase doesn't elevate you, doesn't reflect you, doesn't position you, then it has no place in your life. Remember this, what you give without standards loses its value, but what you offer with intention becomes a symbol of power. And you are here to become that symbol, not just for her, but for yourself. Every dollar you give must have purpose. Every expense must elevate your position. If it doesn't belong. Everything you've learned so far, the power of saying no, the control of money, the mastery of emotion, means nothing if you don't cultivate the mindset that sustains it. Because a man can learn tactics, memorize rules, act as if he has value, but if he doesn't feel it deeply, he will crumble at the first test. True transformation happens from within, and that's what we're going to forge here. Your king mentality. And what defines a king? Not his clothes, not his wealth. His throne isn't made of gold. It's built from his calm, from his ability to stay centered when everything around him begins to shake. While average men break down in an argument, you remain firm. While others beg for attention, you project presence. While the world runs for approval, you choose silence. The silence of a man who already knows who he is. Silent dominance is not about speaking loudly. It's about not needing to speak at all. It's the authority that flows effortlessly. The confidence that communicates without words. The inner peace that confuses everyone around you. Because no one can manipulate a man who isn't afraid to lose. And that, my friend, is your new standard. Nothing she does should have the power to pull you out of your center. She might get upset, distance herself, ignore you, provoke you, but you remain still. Not to punish her, not to prove a point, but because you're no longer willing to betray yourself for anyone. Listen, desire doesn't come from drama, it comes from respect, and respect comes from coherence. If you say you're a man of value but act from scarcity, she feels it. If you say you don't need approval, but every gesture screams, "Look at me, validate me," she senses it instantly. Because the female subconscious is like a radar. It doesn't listen to your words, it reads your energy. That's why your new mission is to align your energy with your words. Let every look, every pause, every silence speak for you. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to prove to be believed. Because a king doesn't compete with peasants. He doesn't react, he doesn't crawl, he simply observes and decides. And here comes the most powerful concept of all, detachment. True power is born when you're willing to lose everything external so you never lose yourself. When you no longer cling to anyone, when you understand that whoever leaves has simply made space for something better, when you no longer chase validation because you've already validated yourself. That's the difference between the conditioned man and the free man. The conditioned man reacts to her behavior. If she pulls away, he chases. If she cries, he gives in. If she gets angry, he changes. But the free man acts from principle. He doesn't react, he chooses, he doesn't move from emotion. He moves with vision. And that vision is built in solitude, not through likes, not through sex, but through discipline, introspection, and the ability to be alone and not feel empty. Because the man who masters his solitude masters every relationship. Now listen to this carefully. Many women don't want you to be strong. They want you to be useful, emotionally dependent, controllable. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because a free man reminds them that they too must rise, that they too must face their own chaos, that they too must become their highest version. And that scares them. But you are not here to be accepted by everyone. You are here to be respected by yourself. And from that self-respect, you will attract only what truly belongs to you, not what you have to chase, not what you have to force, but what flows naturally toward you because it vibrates at the same frequency as your truth. That, my friend, is silent dominance. Knowing you can and not needing to prove it. It's being the kind of man who walks into a room and everyone feels it, even if he doesn't say a word. It's understanding that your power doesn't lie in how much you can gain, but in how much you can lose without losing yourself. And if she decides to leave, let her go. Don't stop her. Don't explain. Don't beg. Because a king who begs has already abdicated his throne. And from today forward, you will never kneel emotionally before anyone again. You can love, you can care, you can protect, but never, ever beg. Your new mindset is this: I am the prize, I am the structure, I am the center, not because I say it, but because I live it, because every decision I make reflects it, because I never trade my worth for company, because my dignity is not negotiable, because the respect I demand from the world, I first give to myself. And here's the final truth: transformation doesn't happen in a day. It's built piece by piece with every decision you make, with every no you hold, with every silence you choose, with every expense you filter, with every woman you let go, out of respect for your own value. Most men will keep begging, keep pretending, keep repeating the same patterns. But you are no longer one of them. Because now you know, because now you understand, because now, inside you, there is a voice that will never be silenced, the voice of your inner king. Listen to it, obey it, and you will never be ignored again. Remember this every morning. You don't need to become someone else to be respected. You only need to return to yourself, to your essence, to your conviction. And when that happens, when you walk with the quiet certainty that nothing is missing within you, the world will feel it, she will feel it. Because respect is never demanded, it is embodied, and from this day forward, you will walk as a man who already has everything, because he has himself. If this message has awakened something inside you, if a part of you refuses to fall back asleep, then subscribe to this channel. Because what's coming next goes even deeper. We're not just going to forge technique, we're going to forge character. Not just attraction, but purpose. Because what you deserve is not validation, it's legacy.
Physical intimacy not as an expression of genuine affection, but as a tool, as currency to get what she wants, and as a weapon for control. Women with numerous partners often unconsciously develop a transactional relationship with their own intimacy. They have learned through practice that it is the most powerful lever to influence a man, and they have turned what should be sacred into a calculated strategy. You will see this in specific situations. She might withhold physical affection when she's upset, not because she isn't in the mood, but because she knows from experience that it's the fastest way to make you apologize and give in. Conversely, she might suddenly initiate intimacy when she needs something